The age of commerce found its fullest expression during the 17th century, which was known as the Dutch Golden Age. Many of the cathedral sculptures, urban palaces, ruled villas, and printed books could be attributed to this era of commerce, which shaped the character of the era's technology. Wealth from land rent, banking, and mercenary activities were used to pay for the creation and deployment of technologies and also impacted the Renaissance society and cultures. The wealth that was created shaped the content and purpose of technology during the expansion of commerce in Europe. In Venice, Florence, and other cities, commercial activities began before the Renaissance. However, it wasn't until other European cities such as Antwerp, Amsterdam, and London was the era of commerce fully realized. It is important to note that there is a historical distinction between the commercial era and earlier failed versions of industrial capitalism. The era of commerce was capitalistic but not industrial in character. The essential steps of the commerce included carrying of goods, processing them profitably, and funding for ships and trading of these goods. Technology was needed to create innovative ship designs, import processing techniques, as well as financial innovation. The Rhine River was a key geographical feature that propelled so-called Low Countries, which are the historic lands around the low-lying delta of the Rhine River, to economic prominence. To get an idea of how vast this waterway was, if you combine the vessel tonnage of the Mississippi River and St. Lawrence Seaway combined, the Rhine almost exceeds the tonnage. The Rhine also occupies two of the largest ports in the world, Rotterdam and Antwerp, which were changed very little since the Dutch Golden Age. This allowed for a very high level of trading activity. And by 1550, imports for the Low Countries were 4 times those of England and France per capita. During this time, there was a great advancement in fortification, urban drainage, mining, harbor engineering, led by Louis de Geer. De Geer was a Walloon Dutch merchant and industrialist. He is considered the father of Swedish industry for introducing Walloon blast furnaces and played an important role in routing Swedish copper exports to Amsterdam. De Geer also created the largest industrial complex in Sweden, making iron and brass, ships and ropes, cannon and cannonballs. The only other nation with a substantial copper production at the time was Japan, and was also controlled by Dutch merchants. The Dutch understood how to bring technology and trade together in pursuit of commerce. Most nations had raw materials needed for shipbuilding or access to colonies that did. The Dutch, however, had neither. The Dutch used the exports of goods such as salt, wine, and herring for the exchange of timber and naval stores. Dutch economic dominance relied on savvy trading. The real key was finding a low-value import such as salt from Spain, Portugal, or France and making it a high-value commodity. Just how important was it to have an innovative, purpose-built ship secured? By having these ships, the Dutch were able to secure an early dominance of the North Sea herring fishery. The full-rigged herring buses operated with a crew of 15 or more and was practically a self-contained factory on water. It is designed to stay out at sea for up to 8 weeks. By the 1560s, the northern province had around 500 herring buses. Dutch herring was not so much about the volume of production, but rather the quality of packed herring and high trade value. This characteristic is why we can distinguish the Dutch commercial era from the industrial era that followed. The most famous of the Dutch ships was the Dutch Blitz ship, which according to the author was in several ways the precise embodiment of commerce. The Flint was a stubby and stout cargo ship. It was slow yet easy to handle, and its extensive use of pulleys and blocks allowed for a small crew of around a dozen to control the yards and sails. Following these innovations, the Dutch shipbuilders practiced a high degree of design specialization and led all the rest of Europe in shipbuilding. It is estimated that in the late 1660s, 3/4 of the 20,000 ships used in the European maritime trade were Dutch, with England and France trailing into a distant second and third.
Creating global capitalism. The origin of capitalism is often credited with the merchants of Venice, along with several other European cities. However, it was the commodity exchanges located in Amsterdam that turned it into the world center for commodity pricing and the flow of trade. This occurred during the 17th century with the creation of 2 Dutch companies. The Dutch East India Company was responsible mostly for trade connections in the Pacific and the trade of spices and cotton, while the Dutch West India Company oversaw trade mostly of sugar and slaves in the Atlantic. The West India Company had planted a profitable sugar colony on the northeast coast of Brazil. Cultivating that sugar, however, served for a demand and a substantial labor force. The Dutch West African trade supplied them that workforce in the form of slaves. This put the Dutch in control of the international trade of sugar and, as a direct consequence, the Atlantic slave trade. The Amsterdam Wissel Bank, or Exchange Bank, was founded in 1609. Before the advent of exchange banks, a merchant needing to pay for a delivery of foreign goods might visit a money changer to purchase sufficient foreign currency. Where possible, merchants usually preferred so-called bills of exchange, which were in effect a merchant's paper promise to pay the bearer a certain sum of money on demand. However, bills of exchange issued by merchants circulated at a profit-sapping discount that varied with the trustworthiness of the merchant and the trading distance. The Wissel Bank slashed these cumbersome transaction costs by providing a means for merchants to quickly and efficiently pay their bills, backed by a huge pool of capital, restoring a measure of confidence amongst merchants and traders alike. In the 1630s, the Dutch fostered the Great Tulip Mania, possibly the most colorful economic bubble the world has ever seen. Regardless of the intrinsic value of a tulip bulb, crazed Dutch traders bid prices to remarkable heights. At one point in 1636, a single Viceroy tulip bulb traded for 8,000 pounds of wheat, 16,000 pounds of rye, 4 fat oxen, 8 fat swine, 12 fat sheep, 2 hogsheads of wine, which is equal to 2 barrels at 140 gallons per barrel, 4 tons of beer, 2 tons of butter, 1,000 pounds of cheese, a complete bed with all of the accessories, a full suit of clothing, and a silver cup, for a total value of 2,500 florin, which is equivalent today to $1.8 million for a single tulip. As you can see by this chart, the prices of tulips reached their pinnacle in February of 1636, and all but overnight the prices dropped and the bubble had burst. In 1602, the Dutch government formed the VOC. With support from the Dutch government, the VOC received warships and an annual subsidy with the main intent to break the political and trading dominance held by Spain and Portugal in Asia.
The Dutch Golden Age was created by a mix of shipping, financing, trading, warring, and enslaving that generated a constant stream of raw materials coming into the Dutch Republic. These were the modern techniques of commerce during this age. From this, a unique sector emerged, often referred to as traffics. The process linked to sugar refining, paper making, brewing, distilling, soap boiling, cotton printing, shipbuilding, and tobacco processing. These activities are what led to the Dutch gaining global dominance, including processing dyes and glazes, cutting and polishing diamonds, grinding glass lenses, making and refining whale oil, bleaching linens, and dyeing and finishing broadcloth. They also started making highly precise nautical compasses, maps, chronometers, and other things, which reinforced their dominance. The Dutch great traffic had a wide reach, as well as expanding all the way to cities like Amsterdam, Haarlem, and Linden. In the 1630s, the city of Linden drastically expanded its output by using higher quality wool they imported from Spain. With the technical innovations that the city of Linden made in the cloth making process, their fine lacquer cloth became famous around the globe for its smoothness of texture. Along with camlet cloth made from Turkish mohair, by the 1650s, 2/3 of Linden's 36,000 textile workers were employed in the making of lackens and camlets. The values of the city's textile output was 9 million guilders, currency or golden coins. During this time, the Dutch were exporting at least 3/4 of Spain's wool and the majority of Turkey's mohair yarn. Notably, the 3 major consumers of the Dutch cloth were France, Spain, and Turkey. By the 1670s, Dutch cloth had become the standard and by consumers. When Venice tried to re-establish in the cloth industry, importing Dutch methods was the only way it could achieve the lightness and smoothness of Linden's fine cloth. The technical factor was crucial to both the continuance and dominance of Dutch over the Spanish wool trade and of fine cloth. The Spanish wool trade lasted till around 1610. The lack of technical innovations, along with inflation and labor costs, basically caused the city to become deserted and poor. Eventually, the fall of the Dutch sugar refining showed how dependent the great traffic was on foreign trade. It expanded in the 1630s when the Dutch had control over northeast Brazil, but the loss of the colony in 1645 forced the Dutch sugar traders to fall back to the Caribbean export trade. The Dutch completely lost the largest market for processed sugar when France imposed restrictive trade policies during the 1660s. But after the 1650s, the Dutch traffics had expanded the start by making pottery that simulated the finest Chinese blue porcelain. They specialized in white tobacco pipes and began to evolve into major proto-industry districts. Already known for its shipbuilding, the Dutch became the center of high-quality paper making and of one of the two centers for refining whale blubber into soap, lightning, fuel, and other products. The district eventually had 128 industrial windmills and 400 by the end of the century. To keep the level of standard up, the Dutch had a close regulation on industry in the form of setting standards for quality and for packaging of goods. Capitalism is a center purpose of technology. It was the creation of technologies and techniques that separated the Dutch commercial era from any other, which also shaped the Dutch society and culture at all levels. Eventually, the Dutch society and culture expanded into oil paintings, meeting the demands of wealthy, eager to have their families appear in portraits. Not only did Dutch society distinguish themselves in financial institutions and economic growth, the influence of commerce and technology had a tremendous effect on the society as a whole.